podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
All right, this week's pod, I'm talking to George Baker, one of the founding members at FC United, fresh back from Milan, where FC United finished third in the Phoenix Trophy this year, which is a trophy for supporter-owned clubs organised around Europe. George, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Cheers.
Yeah, I'm really glad you reached out. I've been thinking about FC United and doing a sort of check-in for a while and somehow keep forgetting each summer. But it's been an interesting ride, hasn't it? I mean, 18 years of FC United now, the 7th tier, Northern Premier League, just outside the playoffs this year. How would you characterise where the club's at and the season that's just finished?
Well, the season that's just happened, a little bit disappointing that we finished just outside the playoffs. It was right up until the second to last game of the season that we were in with a chance of making it. And a 3-point deduction that we'd been awarded's the wrong word, imposed upon us, that had a bit of a detrimental effect as well, because it would have gone down to the last day otherwise. But it's a satisfying season. We have to remember, even though we get some of the biggest crowds in the league, literally, there was only South Shields who ended up winning the league, who get more than us,
right,
by quite some distance as well, attendance-wise. Most of our money is still going into paying off our own ground. We managed to build our own ground back in 2016. And so just the sheer cost of that and the paying back the loans that we had to take out.
Yeah.
To this day, it still kind of swallows up most of our income, which is disappointing. But it's one of those things. We were the first supporter-owned club to build our own stadium in the world, as far as we know. It's happened a few times since, but to actually build one from scratch as a supporter-owned club, we were the first ever to do that. And the issues that comes with that, it wasn't easy doing that in Manchester. So, but it was phenomenal achievement at the end of the day to even just build even a shell of a ground, let alone one that's one that runs perfectly, which it doesn't. But it's one of the trials and tribulations of being a non-league club. You're not going to have a perfect stadium. But yeah, that season.
No, that's right.
Yeah, the season as a whole was relatively successful. We're hoping to have a bit of a stronger push for promotion back to the Conference North. We spent 4 years in the Conference North before the 6th tier, before getting relegated a few years back in 2019. So we're very keen to get back up there. And in the meantime, really enjoying playing in the Phoenix Trophy. As you mentioned, it's the second year we played in the Phoenix Trophy. We won it last year at the finals weekend in Rimini. It's not just for supporter-owned clubs in Europe, in the non-leagues of Europe. It's for clubs with just a decent supporter ethos.
Right.
Ones that look after, have got good youth programs, look after refugees in cities like Prague and Warsaw, where there's obviously a lot of stigma in being a refugee in places like that. We can talk being in England at the moment with the rhetoric coming out from our government, but still, it's still very refreshing to see that in clubs across Europe. And yeah, if you've got a semi-pro club with a decent ethos or you're fan-owned, the Phoenix Trophy is a good tournament to play in, and it's a great way to meet other clubs and make friends.
Yeah, it looked really exciting. A 7th tier side playing in the San Siro. I mean, it looks like the San Siro is not going to last much longer, which is a shame for such a classic old stadium.
We keep hearing this. The San Siro hasn't got long left, but people have been saying this for quite some time, and as the seasons go on, it just seems to keep rolling. So we could potentially be the last English club to play in San Siro, which is an incredible thing. But it's likely that with both Milan and Inter being in Europe pretty much every year, it's likely that they'll be another English team in the next couple of years. But just to think that could happen 18 years ago when we formed FC United, and we were pretty much one of the only, when the Glazers bought the club, there was obviously a lot of opposition to the purchase of Manchester United by that family. But once the purchase was complete, the vast majority of United fans said, right, well, that's that. Let's give them a chance. Let's see how it goes. And we were pretty much the only ones going, no, these people are a cancer. We can see that right from the off, and we won't have anything to do with it. We won't fund their We won't fund their projects. Giving them their money is what they want, and they are going to exploit us. So we're going to take matters into our own hands and form a club in the image of what Manchester United should be. And it's refreshing in many ways to see that everyone's on the same page now when it comes to the Glazers. But given the amount of, we got a lot of support from our fellow United fans at the time when we formed FC United, but the amount of vitriol we got as well from people who are now suddenly staunchly anti-Glazer and want them out at all costs. It's very interesting to see.
It is, isn't it? I mean, yes, for sure. Like, United fans will be on the same page in terms of the Glazers are a cancer, but people still go to the stadium and buy the shirts and so on. So no one took it quite as far as the 1,000 or so people who attended that first meeting and set up the club. What was the impact of Fergie and his sort of, he was quite vitriolic against FC United at the time. I mean, I think he called the club that mob or something like that. You know, does that still sort of linger?
Yeah, that mob United FC he referred to us as, so he couldn't even get our name right. But yeah, I mean, when we won in our first season, we won the North West Counties League Division 2, which is the very bottom of the semi-pro pyramid in English football, level 10 it was. And we won it quite easily in our first season. And it was a hell of a ride that first season, visiting all these little towns and, just having this massive away following. We took about 4,000 to Blackpool, because there was a team called Blackpool Mechanics in our league. And they had to move it to Blackpool SC's Bloomfield Road to accommodate everyone. So that days like that will live forever in the memory. But yeah, when we won that league in the first season, Alex Ferguson was asked by an MEN journalist, I think it was, Manchester Evening News, if he'd like to congratulate our manager, Carl Marginson, on FC United's league success in their first ever year. And by all accounts, he not only refused to answer the question, but ended the press conference there and then. So he's got a bit of a bee in his bonnet about FC. He's referenced us once or twice in his books, saying that he thought it was more about us than them. I mean, sort of more about ourselves than United, which doesn't really make any sense. I don't know. I mean, this is a man, as a manager, you can't fault Sir Alex Ferguson, but he has to take a degree of responsibility. With the fact that the Glazers are there. A degree of responsibility, quite a lot of it. His fallout with McNair and McManus over Rock and Gibraltar led to the outright purchase of United by the Glazers.
Correct, yeah.
It's something that sticks in the throat, really. And this is a man who bills himself as a good socialist, a working class man, and then when a group of Manchester United fans actually put that into action in a way, by forming a democratic football club, for some reason he's dead against it. It doesn't really fit with the man of the people persona he likes to perceive as well.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of contradictions with Fergie. Obviously, a brilliant manager and achieved so much in his career. And yes, his falling out over some horse spunk precipitated this out. May have happened anyway. Who knows? But yeah, it's interesting. He's never and will never criticize the Glazers, and it's a hard contradiction. I couldn't get over that for quite some time. So in 2005, when United's results were not going so well, and in that the autumn, and Fergie had been supporting the Glazers and their takeover. I wrote a piece in The Guardian calling for him to be sacked, and I'm regularly reminded of this and how wrong I was. But it was more than just the results on the pitch that were pissing me off at the time.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, he was, if you don't like it, go and watch Chelsea, was the famous retort he had.
That's right, yeah.
To a fan just shortly after the Glazer takeover during the pre-season of the 2005-06 season. And it's just how disrespectful that is to lifelong supporters. I mean, I know he gave the club so much, Alex Ferguson, but it doesn't give him the right to just be so dismissive of supporters' concerns. And then when he sat next to Avram Glazer at the cup final as well, despite the widespread opposition to that family at United at the moment, it's as if he's sticking two fingers up in some ways to people who dare put a modicum of responsibility onto him for the predicament that we're in.
Yeah. So where do FC United go now? I mean, Kraz have just under 2,000. It's not the peak of where FC United have been. As you said, much of the money that is generated by fans for the club flow out to pay for the stadium. Does that put a hard cap on where FC United can grow to? And as someone who's intimately involved, do you have a sense of where you'd like the club to head?
Well, if the club can go as far as it can, so long as it sticks to its supporter ownership principles. And, as long as it sticks to it's exciting to see how far we can go. So we have this Broaders Park in Moston in North Manchester where we play our own ground. It's a capacity of 4,400. And around our third season back in 2007, 2008 era, the 2008, 2009 era, the attendances when we were still playing in Bury kind of plateaued around 2,000. Then they rose a bit when we got promoted, because we got promoted to the Conference North, the 6th tier.
Yeah.
The same season we moved in to our brand new ground. And so the attendances went up, not just because it was a new ground in a new area of Manchester, a lot of people were curious, but because we went up into a new league. And like any other football club, the more success you have, the more people hear about you, the more people want to come along. So we saw a bit of an uptake in our attendances once we both got promoted and moved into our new ground. And then the attendances kind of plateaued again around 2,000. And that's where more or less where we are now. And obviously losing a lot of away fans as well after we got relegated back from the Conference North to the Northern Premier League. That did have an impact on attendances, because some of the clubs we faced over the years, Stockport County, we're in the Conference North for 4 years. York City were in it with us for 2 years. We've played Darlington, we've played Chester, we've played all sorts of clubs that were very well-established Football League clubs. Halifax Town's another one. Macclesfield we have next season, and they've been getting about 3,500 per game in level 8 of the pyramid. So that'll be an interesting. There's all these well-established clubs that we're playing. And obviously that sort of thing has an impact on attendance. But the future, I mean, it's an interesting one, because we've proved that, you can actually operate a supporter-owned club and make a success of it. Mm-hmm. And to provide an alternative, a cheaper alternative to Manchester United, one where you're listened to as a fan, one where you can actively engage in the running of the club, because, we elect our own board members.
Yeah.
We put forward resolutions and members' votes to the fan base, and if they pass, they have to be adhered to. So the fans are in control of the club, and that will remain unless the fans vote to change it, which is unlikely based on what the foundations which we were created. But we're always here for disillusioned Manchester United fans, people who are fed up with, not just because it wasn't just about the Glazers. If you've been yourself, I believe you said you've been to a few games. So it's for any United fan, and to a lesser extent, any football fan who's fed up with the modern game and the lack of atmosphere at Premier League stadiums, the overzealous stewarding, the overzealous policing, everything that comes with just the way the modern game develops. And FC United is kind of an antidote to that, and will always exist. And I think that as much as everyone at FC United wants the Glazers to leave Manchester United, because we all still are Manchester United fans, vast majority of us, we all still want United to do well. It's a painful catch-22 sometimes, because,
of course,
as every United fan is discovering now, the better United do on the pitch, the more successful, and the more money it makes for the Glazers, and the less likely they are to leave. So it's always been a bit of an annoying paradox, that. But Manchester United's in your blood once it's there, and you can't get rid of it. So we also
I fully agree. I mean, I've spent, as a United fan who wanted the Glazers out for 18 years and was sick of arguing with people in social media or on the blog or wherever else in the pub about the Glazers. There have been times as a fan I've thought it'd just be better if United started losing, because it's more likely to get rid of them. And you just have to deal with that paradox. They are a cancer, but
it's physically impossible. A common question we get is, what would you do if FC United drew Manchester United in the cup? Yeah. And it's a question I don't know the answer to, because I've never cheered against Manchester United. Yeah. And so it's a situation I don't want to think about until it happens. And stranger things have happened in football. And it could happen one day.
Wasn't there the 2010 or so, the cup run, FC United got to the second round, so you were a draw away from maybe making that fixture happen.
Yeah, it's true. We got to the first round proper for the first time in 2010. We were only 5.5 years old at the time as a club, and we got to the first round proper and knocked out Rochdale away from home at their Scotland ground, and they were a League One club at the time. So and then we got Brighton away, who were top of League One at the time. So it was literally the hardest tie on paper we could have possibly got. And we got a replay against them. We went to, it was the Withdean they were playing out there. It was just before they moved to the Amex. And it was a terrible stadium. It was, any Brighton fan will tell you, they don't miss it very much. But they were on their they were on the rise, the one that they've still not come down from at the time. To get a replay against them, it was incredible. We were in the lead for about 80 minutes as well. It was a late equaliser, and then our goalkeeper Sam Ashton saved a penalty in the last minute, and they hammered us in the replay, but it didn't matter. There was about 6,500 people turned up at Gig Lane. I think it's still the highest attendance for a competitive match that we've ever had, 6,500 to 7,000. And it really put us on the map, that cup run. We were on TV and everything, and we got quite a lot of publicity out of that. And it just made people, it reminded people that we still existed. A lot of people heard about FC United when they formed and just thought, oh, they'll probably fizzle out or whatever. And we showed the world that no, we're still there and we mean business and we're going to be around for a long time. And we've got to the FA Cup first round twice again since then, which is no easy feat for a non-league club, no matter what level of the pyramid you're at. So it's particularly if you're not in the National League, you've got to play it's usually at least 3 games that you've got to win until you get to the first round, if you're level 6 or below. So it's always a great occasion when we manage to do that. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing about the future of FC United, really, is we exist for any United fan who's had enough with the modern game and what Manchester United has already turned into and what it might become if, they say, the Qataris or Sir Jim Ratcliffe take over, because there's all sorts of issues there, as I'm sure you've discussed on this podcast and everywhere. The United fan is having the debate all over the world, isn't it? And it's the same for us.
I mean, you're totally right. Like, the antidote to what modern football has become, it couldn't be starker, the contrast between what FC United stands for and the sport washing project over at 115 FC over in East Manchester, and what they have achieved. And that, this is a podcast, so you can't see it, so there's some heavy air quotes on the achieved part. So we discussed it on this pod a lot, the potential for the Qatari takeover. I had someone from Client Earth talk about Ineos and what they do. It's not a nice company. We have to that, right. And so that's, United will become something different again. But this debate stretches all the way before FC United was formed, back to the days of the IPO, I think, the original IPO in 91. And so the goal there was said to be to raise money to rebuild Old Trafford and Stretford End. And I guess it raised £1 million or something like that. But it changed the club from being a football club owned by a local businessman, which it had been for more than 100 years at that point, basically, to being a football club that was designed to serve its shareholders' needs, and that is money. Yeah. And that's never changed since.
Yeah, I mean, a few years later, after that, in 99, when B Sky B tried to take over the club, to take over Manchester United, it's interesting to see how there was very few people I was only young at the time. I was only about 13, 14, but I lived for Manchester United, and I would watch and read anything about them in the news or wherever. And I remember just not seeing certainly nowhere near as much support for the idea of Murdoch and B Sky B taking over than there is for, say, the Qataris taking over. There seemed to be a lot more debate about and a lot more desire to preserve the integrity of Manchester United, because it was already being compromised, as you say, being a PLC, floating on the stock market and what have you. So for it to be privately owned by such a huge media manga, it wasn't an attractive policy for many United fans. And like the fact that was managed to be quashed, and a lot of the fans involved in the opposition, the eventual successful opposition to that takeover, ended up on the steering committee of FC United 6 years later.
Yes.
Quite a few names from that era deserve a lot of credit for forming FC United 6 years on, because it was the same thing. As soon as the Glazers came along around 2004, when they were gradually buying up the shares, the same methods of opposition came into force. And so it's just a shame that culture seems to have died off a little bit, in the sense that, but the problem with that is it's totally understandable, because even though the Edwards era and the PLC era of Manchester United, there was a lot of critics of that. The club was successful, and it seemed to be a successful business model, even if it was pushing out regular match-going fans. So there was nowhere near as much opposition. So it was very much a, if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of attitude towards B Sky B. Whereas now, the worst legacy of the Glazers is how badly they've run Manchester United, to the point where anyone else will do for a lot of the fan base. And it doesn't matter about the integrity of United anymore, whether it can be used as a sports washing or a greenwashing tool. It doesn't matter as long as the Glazers are gone. And that's the worst legacy they've left on Manchester United.
I mean, I fully agree. And I find myself like deeply disappointed by some of the groups that are in opposition to the Glazers. And like, I agree with them 100%. I want these leeches out of the club, right? No one is going to argue against that anymore, although believe me, for many years people did. But the idea that it's somehow better if you get an abusive monarchy owning the club instead, you have to compartmentalize to such a
full stop. You know, I mean, it's just abhorrent. And obviously, given the 15 years we've spent criticizing Manchester City for the exact same things, like the idea that we should just become exactly like them, it's absolutely not an option for me.
Yeah.
And for many others, mainly there's a lot of us here locally in Manchester who agree with that. But yeah, it's a difficult paradox because Sir Jim Ratcliffe isn't exactly the most attractive candidate either, and it makes you wonder what the future holds for Manchester United in that sense, because FC United exists, I suppose, as like a through the looking glass version of Manchester United. It could become something that, as I say before, it's an image of what we want Manchester United to be, a supporter-owned club. But I think Manchester United's grown so much that it's probably beyond that. Even though there have been some big clubs in the English pyramid over the years that have gone fan-owned.
There have been. I mean, Swansea for a while was fan-owned until, and they're probably regretting the fact that they sold out and took outside investment there. So, and unfortunately, yes, I think there's no future for Manchester United as a fan-owned club unless some benevolent billionaire decides to buy it and get fans involved. Seems unlikely. I mean, I know that Must were in negotiations with the Glazers for quite some time, or with the club, I should say, about a share ownership scheme. It didn't happen because of this quote-unquote strategic review and sales process. But even then, it would have been a tiny percentage of non-voting shares. So it was a kind of... The proposal from the club, at least, was not a serious one, I think. And so, yes, that's probably beyond United now, and we had this rogues gallery of just awful potential buyers, of which Jim Ratcliffe and his petrochemicals company, largest polluter in England, or Scotland, I should say, with his chemicals plant there, and the greenwashing project, is probably the best of a bad bunch, because the other options...
That's it. I mean, there's no such thing as a benevolent billionaire. You don't become that rich by being the most ethical person, shall we say. So, and they're the only people who can buy Manchester United now are those kind of people, or large tech companies who themselves have used questionable methods to obtain their wealth and their power and their influence over the Western world. So it doesn't seem like there's a happy ending really when it comes to the future ownership of Manchester United. And that's why it's so important we maintain what we've got at FC United, because we always exist as that alternative to get involved in a club that looks, smells, and feels like Manchester United, but is slightly out of reach of the big leagues.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the obvious question. I know this one's asked a lot. What happens when United are taken over? And I think you've answered it in part by saying, hey, look, we're an antidote to modern football. It's not just about the ownership. And it's probably very unlikely that whoever takes over Manchester United will hold out an olive branch and say, hey, welcome to the family.
So likely that we accept that as well, based on, because again, it's not just about the Glazers, as you say. So yeah, I think we might attract a few new fans who are put off by the idea of either one of Qatar or Ineos owning Manchester United, to the point where they've heard about FC United and want to come along, see what it's like. So there's that potential, if you like. But to hope that bad things happen to Manchester United in order for good things to happen at FC United, it's not a business model that we want the club to take, really. We do exist for that disillusionment, but at the end of the day, we want United to be a stable, community-orientated entity. But it's probably beyond that now with the popularity of the game and the money involved.
All right. So back to FC for a bit. Neil Reynolds has been at the club 5 years. The manager, assume he's staying around for next season. And there's always a lot of change at this level, isn't there? Sort of 10 or 12 players go in and the same go out. So
that's the thing we were warned about when we took over, when we formed the club in 2005 don't get too attached to the players because they move on so quickly and frequently at non-league because the squad rotations, because you very rarely pay for players at this level. So you're getting new players throughout the season. There's no real transfer windows at this level. There is if you buy players, if you're rich enough to do that at this level. And some of them are doing that, but we're not really in the business of doing that. I think we pay for one. I think there's been money involved in like 2 transfers out of the many hundreds in our history. So yeah, there's a bit of a revolving door culture. But when it comes to Neil Reynolds, he's really taken the club to heart. Reno, as he's affectionately known among the fans, he really does enjoy it at FC United. He's got to know a lot of the fans personally. He's always showing up to club events and things like that. And he worked full time for the club for a while last season. He quit his job as a headmaster of a school in Blackpool to work full time for FC United, running our academy. That hasn't worked out as we would have wanted, but he still remains as first team manager on a part-time basis. And it just shows how much he loves the club, how committed he is to it. Because we had, for the first 12 years of our existence, we had the same manager, Carl Marginson, and he achieved a lot. He was won us 4 promotions in the space of 10, 11 years. Got us to that long cup run against Rochdale and Brighton and numerous other things. But the time came for him to move on. And it was very difficult to see the scenario where we'd have such affection for a manager who was there for us for that long amount of time. I think after Ferguson left United, he was the second longest serving manager in the English pyramid behind Arsene Wenger. Right. So he really did have a huge influence over the club. And to see the way Neil Reynolds has come in and himself has become a very popular figure amongst the fan base. He still gets criticism from certain quarters, and that's fair enough. You're a manager of a club, that's what happens. But it's good. It's heartwarming to see how he's taken the club to heart and really gets involved in it. Yeah.
And so the season's just finished, and we're like 4 weeks away from pre-season. I think something like that. It never stops, even at non-league level. What does next season look like? You mentioned there'll be some pretty big opposition in the league next season.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of changes going on with teams being moved through regional leagues and things like that. So we've got about 5 or 6 new teams, promotion, relegation, and moved sideways from like the Southern League. Macclesfield are the big one, obviously, since they have reformed as a Phoenix club. They went into level 9, I believe. And so they've had 2 very quick promotions. Got quite a bit of money behind them. Obviously, Robbie Savage is their director of football and all that. So we've played friendlies against them the last 2 years. And it seems like they've got a good setup back at their old Moss Rose ground. So they are the big favourites. And it feels like that's going to be happening a lot. And obviously, Bury are coming back into the fold now. They've merged. Bury FC and Bury AFC have merged. Yeah. So
finally made peace, the fan groups there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a crazy story, that. It was interesting because Bury were our hosts for so long at Gig Lane. Yeah. For 9 years that we played our home games at Gig Lane. And then fast forward a few years later, Bury's fan groups are calling up SC United asking how do you form a football club, lads, because we need to do that now. And so Bury AFC went on the supporter ownership model and provided football in the Bury area for Bury fans for a couple of years, and now they've merged with what was left of the old Bury FC. And the important thing was, they had Gig Lane, didn't they? Yeah. So now they've merged. Bury AFC will become Bury FC and will play at Gig Lane. So you can expect to see them competing with us in a year or two, I would imagine. And there's a lot of that happening. And it's so depressing to see so many clubs in the Northwest suffer from such dire financial straits when you've got these monoliths in Manchester at the exact same time. It's a very interesting metaphor for capitalism in general, really. Seems like the richest have it all and the poorest have nothing. So there's all these clubs collapsing and reforming in the North and the Northwest in particular, and we come in against them as they're rising back up, and that in itself is taking up promotion spots. So, and there's only 2 promotion spots from the Northern Premier League, which we play in, the winners and the winners of the playoffs. Yeah. So it's not easy league to get out of. But there's a few less teams. There's 22 teams rather than 24, like in the National League. Is National League 24?
I think so. Yeah, 46 games. Yeah.
So regardless, only 2 promotion spots in a league with 20 plus teams. It's not easy to get out of. So,
but I mean, the thing you mentioned there about the kind of dichotomy between clubs failing and the amount of money available, state money at City and money at United. It is a very stark contrast, and I wonder whether the proposed football regulator will have an impact there, because there are certain rules around tightening up around who can own a club and why and what they can do with the club, and of course many of the kind of ethos of FC United. We won't change the club's kit, name, or logo unless the fans say so. I mean, it's basic stuff, isn't it? But some of that's in the proposed white paper.
That's it, yeah, and that it's needed. That even if it sounds very basic, but it could happen. Anyone can take over and just destroy your tradition based on their personal whim. You saw it at Cardiff. We use the kit analogy, just going from blue to red. Salford as well, Salford City. Everybody thinks they're this club. They are doing good things in the community of Salford, but at the end of the day, it's a club that has had a hell of a lot of money thrown at it. They've flown up the leagues and not necessarily gained the fan base to back it up. And they changed the badge and the kit colours, the class of 92, as soon as they came in. Yeah. So they're being hailed as these like football purists, but they're businessmen before they're football purists, the class of 92, I would say. They changed it from amber. The club is the Ammies, and they played in amber as a result. And they just did away with that straight away, made them play in red, changed their badge, and now it's a completely unrecognisable club. It has pros and cons, but one thing that really winds me up is when people confuse FC United for Salford City, which happens alarmingly regularly.
I'm not surprised. The kits look very similar.
The kit's location, but still with in many ways the antithesis of Salford City when it comes to ethos. But at the same time, they're a club nearby who we have worked with once or twice, right? Because we can learn things from each other.
It's a very interesting story, Salford, of course. I mean, part owned by Class of 92, but I think the biggest shareholder is Peter Lim, who has
and there's another one who's got a Glazer reputation at Valencia.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that club is suffering a lot, and it's a big traditional historic club, and things are not going well for them. And he's a very rich fella who is putting his money to his own personal endeavours, not necessarily for
it does grind my gears a bit
the good of the football club.
It does grind my gears a bit when I see Gary Neville pontificating about the evils of the Glazers at last. It took him 16, 17
years.
And then at the same time, while he's doing that, he's working with very closely with a man like Peter Lim, not just with Salford, but how else did he get that Valencia job, that ill-fated job? It was all due to that kind of nepotism. And for him to continue working with a man like Peter Lim whilst saying how bad it is that men like the Glazers are involved in football, it does stick in the throat slightly.
Yeah, well, he there's a lot of contradictions with Neville because let's root. I mean, I don't want to just bash him because he's obviously a United legend on the pitch, but the contradictions off it are quite heavy. But so what has he said about ownership? He's finally said the Glazers are bad. That took him a very, very long time. And I have to wonder why exactly, because he needed cooperation from the club on certain stuff. And then he said there should be unlimited owner financing. And why has he said that? Because that's what Salford are doing. Basically, FFP or profit and sustainability rules don't really work until you get into League One. And then he's against state money, but he's been quite unclear about why that is the case. And so there's a lot of contradictions, I think, with him and football club ownership, as there are with many people in football. And it's one of the frustrations of
I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Neville. He does say a lot of things I agree with, but then when you see the fingers in so many pies he's got here in Manchester and in football itself, it does make you. He is quite hypocritical a lot of the time, and he was very critical of FC United, I believe, at the very beginning. We had a lot of ears in a lot of places, and he was very unhappy about it all. Even though one of his best friends from the Manchester United Academy, Mark Rawlinson, was one of our first players and one of our first captains, I believe. So, and he's barely mentioned us. It was Jamie Carragher who name-checked us when talking about FC United and the rebellion against the Glazers, when it became to the fore a couple of years ago. Neville's never said a word about us, so I think he seems to prefer to pretend we don't exist, whilst also approaching us for help when Salford City wanted to expand their Morlane ground. He did visit us apparently, but kept it quite quiet on his social media channels that he'd gone to FC United to have a look at how we'd built our ground.
Well, I'm sure he's very grateful.
We've had a lot of ex-players, ex-United legends speak at me. We've had like gala dinner fundraisers and things at FC United. And we've had a lot of United legends such as Gordon McQueen, Wilf McGuinness, Andy Cole. They've all spoken at these things and come to visit the club. Clayton Blackmore was another one. And it's great when those players come and visit and you get to meet them. Brian McClare's another one. But when it'd be nicer to see some ex-players from the 90s era, from when I was growing up as a United fan, embracing FC United more, because it's a club for the fans, and the fans are what make football, and it was the fans that paid their wages for so long. And I think even if it's not for, FC United is not for every Manchester United fan, and I get that, but I think every Manchester United fan should be proud of what we've achieved in many ways, because when we formed in 2005, the reputation of Manchester United fans, like we had this, we're all know-nothing glory hunters from Kent and Surrey, and that they know nothing about football and we just like the success. FC United proved that that's complete nonsense. We were a ramshackle group of United fans involved in supporter associations who formed their own football club, and within 5 or 6 years got to the second round of the FA Cup. As I say, we just played in the San Siro. We've played all over the world, all over Europe, in the USA, friendly games in the USA, Sweden, South Korea we even went to. And it just proved that Manchester United fans actually do know a lot about football and actually do care, and particularly ones local to Manchester. And there's plenty of us in Manchester, and that's another myth it dispelled. And it really gets the backup of a lot of football fans that we made such a success. So every United fan, even if FC United is not for you, you should be proud of what FC United have achieved, because
that's right. I think so. Yeah,
action and making a success of it.
Yeah. Okay, just a couple of topics I wanted to touch on before we close out. I mean, what's the political situation at FC United these days? Because a few years back there was quite a few ructions in the family, weren't there, about the direction the club was going?
Well, yeah, it was
how was that solved? And do you feel like everyone's on the same page now?
For the most part, yes. I mean, it was a difficult time that around. As soon as we moved into our new ground, we'd had a board who had been pretty much the majority of the board had been on the board of directors since the start of the club. Now, you have to stand, obviously, we elect our own board members, but you have to stand every 2 years. And what was happening is that the familiar faces and the familiar names were getting re-elected and re-elected and re-elected. And a lot of our fans, as much as we were proud of the democratic process of the club, we were getting caught up in the ride, basically, letting the administrative side of the club go with the people who wanted to get involved in that sort of thing. And so the same people kind of got voted in time and again. And that resulted in a little bit of complacency from that board, in the sense that they had a set way of doing things, and because they were there and they've been there for 10 years or whatever it was running the club, they felt they knew best as to how the club should be run. And it's fair enough, given that they did their hours and everything as board members. But when criticism started to flow in around the time we moved into our new ground, and we found there wasn't really much of a business plan as to how to make the ground sustainable, how to putting on events and things like that. And there was actually a document signed with the council, Manchester City Council, when they loaned us a sizable 6-figure sum to help us build the ground. But it was obviously a loan with interest that we continued to pay back. There was all sorts of conditions in there that weren't put to the members, and it kept coming out. It seemed like every other week that there was something more and more wrong with what's going on now that we'd moved into Broadhurst Park. And there didn't seem to be a business plan. So when that criticism was put to the board, instead of taking it on board and saying, yes, we could have communicated with you as members better and things like that, they just put up a wall of silence and essentially accused, because some people, obviously tensions got heated, and some rather unsavory language ended up coming out, and they used those examples of to put up basically a wall of silence, and said that anyone criticizing them is abusive and out of order. And it got to the point where changes were needed. So the board ended up there was all sorts of protests at FC United. And that's the thing, we were a protest club. So to set up as a protest club anyway. So to assume that the fans would just lay back and accept everything the board was saying when everything looked a bit fishy wasn't going to happen. So there was all sorts of protests at the ground, and I took part in them myself. I was very disillusioned with the direction the board went. And it eventually led to the board stepping down and an EGM being called, where an entirely new board was elected. Only 2 or 3, I believe, an 11-person board with only 2 or 3 from the previous board getting elected. And those 2 or 3 were ones that had come in recently because they felt like they needed to be changed. So brand new, but that was, again, in many ways, that's one of the great things about FC United, is that we got to vote with many of the previous board members who felt that they wanted to carry on with the vision that they had the chance to stand. And with the new information that was put forward, they had the chance to stand for re-election and get back on the board. And the members decided they wanted to go with a new group of FC United fans who wanted to take it in a different direction, do things a bit differently. I was on the board myself for 2.5 years. And I tell you what, it's a hell of a lot of work. It's all voluntary.
Yeah.
You really do see how much work it goes into running a football club, even one as low down as we are, because it's a hell of a lot of work, and it's very few people get paid to do any of this work. We have a handful of full-time staff at FC United, and most of it is done by volunteers, and those volunteers deserve a huge amount of credit. But obviously, there's been hiccups along the way, because it's like any democracy. You're going to get factions breaking up, going, we think this should be done this way. Well, we think that should be done this way. And the end goal is the same thing. You all want the club to do well. You just got different ideas for it, and it's helped in many ways, because that's democracy.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're still electing a new board. There's still people coming forward to stand for the board. There's still resolutions being put forward. And obviously we're going into an online voting system now, which is a bit overdue, I would say. And that will get more and more members engaged in the democratic process. So when it comes to the governance of the club, the future looks all right.
All right. And finally, before we close out, a positive story, sort of. Callum Gribbin, who many people will know from his United Academy days, got a bad knee injury, and the fans fundraised to pay for his operation. So how did that go?
Yeah, and it was devastating for Callum, because, as you say, there's so many articles about him out there about what a prospect he was, and what a prospect he still is. We have to remember, his career's not over, but he's had so many setbacks.
Yeah,
and this knee injury has really came out of nowhere as well. He was really finding his feet at FC United. It's one of the best goals from last season was the last minute free kick he scored at. We were playing now, but it was a league game on a Tuesday night. And he scored a fantastic free kick in the last minute. And he's certainly one of the shining stars of this season, despite missing quite a lot of it. And that's another great thing about FC United. He's not the first player that we've done crowdfunders for when they've had a hardship in their life. Our captain, Adam Dodd, suffered from a very bad heart attack last year, on the cusp of us travelling to Rimini to win the Phoenix Trophy, in fact.
Yeah.
And he was only saved by his girlfriend, who thankfully knew CPR, and he was clinically dead for a good few minutes. And he was obviously out. Had to have it's very similar to what Christian Eriksen went through.
Yeah.
And we even arranged Christian Eriksen to sign an FC United shirt and get it framed for him. And that was just one of the things we did. Obviously there was a crowdfunder for him, which raised thousands of pounds whilst he was recovering and after he had his pacemaker fitted. Because that's the thing. These players, they play at semi-professional level. They have lifestyles outside of football. And they have to make a living. And when something like that happens to them, a lot of them work in trades or they're self-employed, and they need that money to survive. If they've got a medical injury such as a heart defect or a torn cruciate ligament, it really does affect their day-to-day life. So it's great that we're a club that can do that for the players. And there's lots of other clubs at non-league that do that for that sort, because it's a lot easier now to do those crowdfunders, and there's so much passion at this level of football. Not just here at FC United, but across the league for all these clubs. So that is a heartwarming story that we managed to raise that money. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, George. I totally agree with everything you're saying. I do encourage United fans to check out FC United. If you want some background on the club, if you need a refresher, Red Rebels is an excellent book on the formation of the club as well. A few years old now, that one. But
Red Rebels, JP O'Neill's book. Yeah, it was released in 2017.
Exactly.
It covers basically the history of FC United from the very beginning, from the 99 era that we touched on the BSCAP campaign and the formation of FC United and its subsequent changing running with the different fans taking over the board. So that's certainly a book I would recommend. Obviously, we've got FC United we're online. We've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We sell 10 match ticket books as well. So we sell season tickets, and it's a pay what you can afford scheme as well. So there's a minimum price, but even if the minimum price is too low, you can always contact the office and work out a deal. You can pay in installments. And there's a 10 match ticket book as well, which is like a half season ticket. So there's loads of options, and it's going to be either £12 or £13 next season. That's another thing we voted on, whether or not the price should increase next season, because it's up to us whether or not we charge ourselves more money. So it's been £12 entry for the last few years, and it could go up to 13, but if the fans vote against it, it'll stay 12. So if anyone wants to come along, you're more than welcome.
Great, thanks, George. Great to talk to you. Good luck for the new season when it starts in a month's time or something. Football never ends.
Doesn't start a long way. Yeah, thanks very much, Ed. It's been a pleasure. Cheers.
All right, bye now.
Bye.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.